It's mock draft Monday, and Keith Sanchez have the Kansas City Chiefs taking explosive Georgia Bulldog edge rusher Nolan Smith. We'll discuss it next on the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast.
You are Locked On NFL Draft, your daily podcast covering the NFL Draft. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On NFL Draft Podcast, your daily podcast covering your favorite draft prospects, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It is your boy, Damian Parson, always on the ones and twos. You can find me on Twitter at DP_NFL, my national scout over at the Draft Network, and your favorite and local running back guru. And the champ is back in the building with me again on this mock draft Monday, his mock draft, my boy Keith Sanchez, and you can find him on Twitter at the Talent Code. Talk to him, Keith.
What's up, Locked On family? This is Keith Sanchez, senior draft analyst with the Draft Network. And like DP says, man, 2019 national champion. Yes, we're here to bring you championship level content surrounding the NFL draft, prospects, philosophies, roster building, everything surrounding the NFL draft. But DP, it's mock draft Monday. It's mock draft Monday. It's mock draft Monday. And guess what? It's my mock draft Monday, right? So you know how we're going to go about this, man. We're going about the best, the worst, and the sleeper picks. I'm going to let DP kick us off, man, and give me my praise on which he thinks was the best pick that I have for this mock draft.
Man, the best pick to me, Keith, going through the first round of your mock, it was Nolan Smith at the back end of the first round, you know, to the Kansas City Chiefs, man. An explosive, physical player on the edge that can, you know, the loss of Frank Clark, you know, they released him, you know, this offseason. So that opens up a void opposite of George Karlaftis going into his second year, who had a solid rookie year, Keith. I think Nolan Smith is a perfect, and I'm not a baseball guy, but I like some baseball terms, is a perfect changeup to what the type of rusher and style that George Karlaftis is. Nolan Smith is the perfect changer for that. He's the fastball. He's the bender. He does bring that power. He sets the edge in the run game. And I do believe he's a 3-down player, Keith. So I think about the fact that the Kansas City Chiefs went defense kind of heavy last year. Three defensive backs. They got George Karlaftis. I absolutely love this pick. Nolan Smith to the Kansas City Chiefs.
Oh, man, appreciate you, man. I work hard at what I do. Then, you know what I'm saying? That's all I can say, man. But listen, I really like that pick. And it was interesting as the draft board fell, and then you're sitting there and Nolan Smith is still sitting there at the back end, because if you look at it through two different lenses, right? If you look at it from his combine performance, he's a top 5 pick, right? Mm-hmm. But when you talk about sack production, and then injury and stuff like that, he's probably more of a second-round pick. So that's why I slid him in the back end of the first round. But I think it'll be interesting how his name continues to evolve over the rest of the draft, right? Like in a draft process, to see if his name picks up steam, because, man, you're talking about a guy that's 230, 240 that ran a 4.4 or 4.3 or something like that.
4.3, yeah. Like
4.39 or something. So he had probably, if you go pound for pound, he probably had the best combine performance of any draft prospect. So, man, I definitely think he's going to lock himself as a first rounder. But it was interesting to see. I want to know how high he can go. And you know, we have to tune into my next mock draft, because he may get a significant bump in my next mock draft. But DP, for me, man.
Well, real quick, before you even get to yours, I want to ask you even more so on Nolan Smith. Were there any other teams that you looked at as you're going through your mock where you're like, he could fit here, but you just were a little like, I don't know if I would put him here in the first round?
DP, I think that's for the next segment, baby, for the worst, because I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about where I almost put him. And, you know, I like to add a little spice to things, you know, from time to time. So we'll talk about that when the worst pick comes up for the next segment. But there was definitely something that I thought about, and I think it's going to surprise the listeners when they hear where I almost put him. But for me, man, my best pick, DP, my best pick was Luke Musgrave to the Green Bay Packers. And it's multiple levels, right? I think Luke Musgrave is a really good football player, talented, pass catching, right? I think he has the highest ceiling, right? He has the potential to be one of those dominant tight ends when you talk about a Darren Waller and Travis Kelce. I think he has that upside and potential, right? But I thought about it more so from The Packers are moving on from Aaron Rodgers. Jordan Love is there. We don't know if Jordan Love is a Hall of Fame quarterback like the Packers have had for the last 30 years. We don't know if he's a Pro Bowl quarterback. We don't know if he's an average starting quarterback, or we don't know if he's a bad quarterback, right? Like we don't know where he's going to fall on that scale of QB level play. But what we do know is this, that I believe in surrounding your young quarterbacks with as many weapons as possible, so that way he's comfortable, right? And I always talk about this, learning the game the right way. That's something that Jordan Love needs to do. And I think that having a tight end prospect like Luke Musgrave, 6'5", 6'6", runs, I think it was a low 4.6 or a high 4.5 that he ran in the 40. Superb athlete. Then you have Christian Watson on the outside. You have Romeo Doubs. And this is what else. And I may give a little preview into round 2 of my mock. Maybe they come up and get a slot wide receiver. Who knows, right? And that way they can really fill it out. But I think getting a tight end prospect like Luke Musgrave, really helps balance things out for Jordan Love, because when you remember him from Utah State, right, it was some bad decisions that he made. Like the arm talent was there. He just tends to make bad decisions because he gives his wide receiver chances. And if you're going to give any wide receiver a chance, give a 6'5", 6'6" tight end a chance to make a play on the football.
Keith, I really like that pick, especially for the Jordan Love situation. I sat down with Peter Bukowski, the host of the Locked On Sports and Locked On Packers, and we talked about Jordan Love on the show. And I think for me, it's like the reason why I like this pick is, like you talked about Christian Watson, having Romeo Doubs, and then adding Luke Musgrave. Like I said, don't know what that second round is going to look like, but if it's a slot receiver, it's like build this offense around your young quarterback, right? So Luke Musgrave, along with those two big receivers, essentially they're what I call area code guys, where it's like the quarterback just put it in the area code, right? Like you don't have to put it right on you don't have to drive right up to the house, right? You don't have to have the pinpoint, location, right? Like you don't need that Apple location to go know exactly where you're going. Just get in the area code, and Luke Musgrave can make those plays as well as Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, and it's another dynamic piece vertically. Right. And you talked about the bad decisions with him with Jordan Love. He was playing a ton of hero ball because he didn't have any help at Utah State. So It's like, okay, how do you I always cross pollinate with my references of sports. How do you know if a guy is being young Kyrie Irving in Cleveland with no help, right? Or he's being Russell Westbrook. And what I mean by that is when you have no help, you have to play hero ball because you're the best player on the team. Now, when you have help, right? When you got Kevin Durant at 6'11", that sniper in the corner wide open, are you still going to drive it into 4 people in the paint and try to dunk on everybody, or are you going to kick it to your open shooter, right? That's a Russell Westbrook where you make those weird decisions. But can you be that Kyrie Irving where it's like, okay, I got some talent. I got Kevin Love. I got LeBron. I'm going to just play my role. I don't have to be the hero. And I think if you do Luke Musgrave and these weapons and adding these weapons to that offense can allow you to see what you have with Jordan Love. Is he going to play hero ball, or is he going to play, in structure, how the offense needs to be ran? And I like this pick a lot, man.
Yeah, no. So we'll get into the structure of the Green Bay Packers, but I think they did what they were supposed to do. I did what I think they should do, right? In this mock draft, by putting Musgrave there and putting the pressure on Jordan Love to figure it out real quickly. If you have something, if you don't have something, man. Speaking of have something or don't have something, right? We just went from best, and now we're about to go into worst, DP. So now you get to get critical, man. We're gonna see how this thing go, man. We don't know if Locked On NFL Draft is gonna split after this or what's going on, man. But I'm gonna let my guy DP, man, tell me what pick he hates the most from my mock draft coming up next.
The number one sports book in America is FanDuel. And if you're a new customer, you get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on and sign up today to claim your no sweat first bet. Then you can wager on everything from money line to point spreads to which teams will be cutting down the net, especially you talking about the tournament that's going on right now. So all of this is on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/locked-on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. The worst pick of Keith Sanchez's mock 7.0. God, we've done a lot of mocks at this point. It is Kalijah Kancey to the Dallas Cowboys, man. I did
I
not
was
like
not
that
expecting
pick.
you to pick that one.
I did not like it, Keith. I like Kancey. I like the potential of it, but I'm like, man, like this is a what 270-pound, 80-pound D tackle, right? That's really disruptive in the passing game. And I'm like, all right, so what are you dealing with in the NFC East? Brian Robinson Jr., right? Antonio Gibson in Washington, Saquon Barkley in New York, Jalen Hurts and whoever the heck they got back there running back, because it don't even matter because they're gonna run the rock. And I'm like, Kalijah Kancey, you're gonna have your welcome to the NFL moment, big fella. When you see Jason Kelsey one-on-one, right? When you see these interior offensive linemen in the NFC East that can come up, that can really get their hands into you. And I'm like, okay, pass rush wise, I love it. You add more juice to the pass rush, Keith. But I think about it from a rundown standpoint, and it's just like just like basketball, right? Like if I can wear down your legs, I can take away everything else. I can take away what you do best. I can take away your offense. And the way that you wear down the legs of a pass rusher, you run the ball on them. You lean on them. Get your big 300-pound offensive lineman to lean on this undersized kid. So that's that's for me. It was like, man, I would prefer to see somebody that can really attack, like eat up space and do different things. And I just view him as somebody that's going to be more of a specialist right now. So that's why I was like, I don't like it. I don't like it.
Nah, man, so that's the thing with these mock drafts, right? Because you end up it's team need, like what you know that the team need versus what's the general manager's trends. You know what I'm saying? And it's almost a damned if you do, damned if you don't type situation, right? Because
Right.
if you go with the exact team need, and then fans are going to be like, hey, this team never drafts this, right? And then but if you go with the opposite, then you're going against the grain, right? So
Right.
man, Kancey was tough for me. And the reason I went with them was because the Dallas Cowboys, you look at their defensive line, like over the past 5 to 10 years, they continue to go after these smaller body defensive tackles. It's weird. Like they almost rather 270-pound defensive tackles. I have no idea. That's why people continue to run the football on them. But it's something they're committed to. So I say, you know what? If y'all committed to it, why not get the guy that's really small and really explosive, right? Like if you're
Right.
going to do it, go ahead and do it all the way. Don't just kind of do it. So
Nah.
sitting at the back end of the first round, because my past mocks, I've mocked them a cornerback, but they did a good job. They addressed that opposite cornerback position with Stephon Gilmore. So I said, okay, cool. Linebacker, there is no linebacker that anybody's taking in the first round. Safety, maybe, but probably not, right? And then wide receiver, Quentin Johnston was off the board for me. I think Zay Flowers was off the board already. So I'm like, man, I don't know. So I went with Kalijah Kancey because I thought it fit a positional need, and then it also fit a trend that they usually go with smaller defensive tackles. But I can fully understand. It's always different, when your guy is criticizing your picks, man. But it's all good, man. It's all good. I don't think you went too hard on me. I understand it, man. But listen, for my worst picks, man, because you have to be critical of yourself, right? It's very key in football industry, whether you're playing, whether you're podcasting, whether you're breaking down, and you got to be self-aware. So I'm very self-aware of what I was doing, and two picks that I was really unsure of. That was the Detroit Lions. The Jalen Carter to the Detroit Lions, and then I had Michael Mayer with pick 18 go to the Detroit Lions. And here's why. The Jalen Carter situation with Dave Campbell, I don't know where we're at with Jalen Carter as far as, I hate bringing up a character, like let's just say off the field situations. I won't even call them issues. I'll say situations, right? And we know that they're building something, or they're attempting to build something that Detroit hasn't had for a while, right? As far as a true gritty winning program. And, you hear mumblings and rumblings, and you're like, I don't know if Jalen Carter and the way he approaches things is necessarily going to fit with how Campbell approaches things, right? But the talent was too much to pass up on, right? And then I got to pick 18, and they traded TJ Hawkinson, and they need tight end help. DJ Chark is not coming back. He's with the Panthers now. They need wide receiver help, right? So I was like, okay, well, get him a tight end in Michael Mayer. Now, we know that Michael Mayer, he's not the most explosive guy. But I think they traded Hawkinson because they don't feel like they need a explosive tight end, right? They need someone to just kind of contribute in the run game and then, get out and catch a couple passes. And this is kind of the, he's getting I think he's getting the label of like the kind of guy that does it all, right? Like he, well-rounded guy, high
Yeah.
character guy. Like he's probably the Aiden Hutchinson of this draft. Like, and not talking about talent wise, but just how it's perceived as far as the football character. So I'm like, this is a good fit as far as character, but I don't know about the talent. You know what I'm saying? Like at the 18 pick, I'm like, is this talent something that they can find in a second, third round? So me being critical of myself, the Detroit Lions did both picks for them. I was like, man, I don't know which way to go with them.
Keith, and that's interesting that you pick because you talk about I shocked you with Kancey. You shocked me with this. I didn't think you was gonna pick these two, man. I was like, that's kind of a haul. But to your point, I totally get your reasoning, and I think you broke it down well. But I would say, like kind of on the flip side of that, I feel like Campbell is one of those coaches. Like I'm so high on this man as a coach. You know what I'm saying? Watching him operate and watching how he runs his team, the respect those guys have for him. I think if there's anything that's not like lingering with Carter, I think Campbell will be good, be good for him as a coach.
Yeah, and that was the other side of it is that he's one of the few impact players, right? Like I don't think they're on the hot seat, but they're on the warm seat, right?
Yeah.
Like at the end of the day, they can't repeat what they did last year, and people are going to be okay with it. So they need an impact guy, and I think Jalen Carter is that. Like he can immediately make plays like Aiden Hutchinson did last year,
and putting those two side by side, rushing off the same, on the same side of the center. That's so dangerous for opposing quarterbacks. And then the Michael Mayer thing, I love how you broke it down. Like, okay, they traded TJ Hawkinson, right? For one, he was coming up on a payday. They didn't want to pay him. And like you said, this offense more than likely doesn't need that explosive tight end, right? And I think he would pair very well with Amon-Ra St. Brown and a healthy Jameson Williams, right? Like, you got that field stretcher. You got your guy that your Z slot, whatever you want to use Amon-Ra as, your route runner. He's your chain mover as well. But you have Michael Mayer that can work the middle of the field and do it well. So I actually like those picks, but I totally understand your reasoning, though. You know what I mean? Because at the end of the day, things could, if it don't work out, it could get kind of ugly.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. I'm like, this has potential to be really good and really bad. And so, listen, man, in the first segment, right, and we kind of teased that you were like, okay, where did you almost put Nolan Smith? To be honest, I almost put Nolan Smith number 6 to the Detroit Lions. I almost went that aggressive. I almost went there.
Man.
I almost went there because I thought about it. I'm like, this is a high character guy. The effort is there. The motor is there. The love for the game of football. Like, he just seems like a Dan Campbell guy, right? Like, you just see like, okay, I can see him in Hard Knocks doing those type of things. So, yeah, that's what I almost went. I almost went that aggressive. I don't know if that's a prelude, right, or a precursor to what may come. We have to be tuned in for Keith Sanchez mock draft. That'll be 8.0 at that point. We do a lot of mock drafts over here at the Draft Network. But, man, DP, listen, we went best. We went worst, right? Now we're talking sleeper picks, right? We're talking about the picks that they're sleeping on them. You have to wake them up, let them know this is a good football player, man. So coming up next, man, DP is going to pick out his sleeper pick from my mock draft 7.0.
Time to wake him up, Keith. Sleeper pick is in. Joe Tippmann to the Buffalo Bills. And Keith, the same way I know, we watched this team flame out in the playoffs in the cold weather. They're a cold weather team. They just didn't play physical enough. They couldn't match the physicality of the Cincinnati Bengals, right? The Cincinnati Bengals came up in there with the mentality that we're going to run the ball. We're going to blanket your receiver. We're going to take away Stephon Diggs. Josh Allen, what can you do? And it's like, it's time to give him some help. And you drafted James Cook. Let's run the ball. But when you have an interior offensive line that can't generate enough push, they don't play physical enough, they don't play with enough grit and power, you can't do it, Keith. You can't move a DJ Reader if you don't got somebody to move him. Joe Tippmann is one of those guys, Keith. This is one of Dame's dudes. You know what I mean? This is one of my guys. I love Joe Tippmann, 6'6", 320, good athlete for his size, but powerful, in the run game, strong anchor, good footwork, lateral agility, and he can pass protect for your quarterback. Yes, Wisconsin does way more running than they do passing. So, yes, he will be exposed more to pass rushers with Josh Allen at quarterback rather than Graham Mertz or whoever else they've run through the QB situation at Wisconsin. But, man, I think this is one of those picks that we get through the season. It's like, man, this is a potential. Remember remember Creed Humphrey when the Kansas City Chiefs drafted him,
Yep.
and everybody was like, man, how did Creed Humphrey? I don't know, he fell a little bit, but like, how did the Chiefs literally remake their entire offensive line in one offseason? And it was through the draft. I feel like Joe Tippmann to the Buffalo Bills could be one of those picks that we're like, man, teams really let Josh Allen get a Joe Tippmann in front of him, and now they're running the ball, and it's making this offense much more dangerous.
Yeah, I like it. And so there was one key point you hit on, right? You talked about Wisconsin running the football, and then you talked about Joe Tippmann being more exposed to having a pass protect, right? But I think that's one of his plus traits, right? I think he may be better in pass protection than actually in run game, right? And that's crazy to say from a Wisconsin center. But the thing is this, he's 6'5", 6'6". So what I realize is that this guy has a lot of range at the center position. And when those center positions, right? Sometimes you don't have your primary defensive lineman to block, right? So now you're checking, you're scanning, you're looking for extra work, picking up things, and he has so much range. That's what I realized when I watched him. I'm like, man, this is easy work for this guy, right? Like he's 6'5", 6'6", long arms. He can get to, if he has to go to his left, get to his left fairly quickly. He has to go to his right, get to his right fairly quickly. And when you have an offensive lineman, a center like that in specific, that makes your guards better, right? So I'm expecting them to have better guard play just from drafting a guy like Joe Tippmann to the Buffalo Bills, man. I thought this was also a sleeper pick just because the interior offensive line position is not sexy. You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's one of those positions where you definitely need that guy, right? And we've seen offenses like you could talk about my mock draft, right? I went John Michael Schmitz to the Vikings. I almost went wide receiver, but that center position for the Vikings needed so much improvement. I thought it was definitely something that the Vikings needed to address, and so did the Buffalo Bills if Josh Allen wants to handle business, because that window, I hate to say that window is closing, but it's getting a lot more competitive.
Mahomes is about to shut that door if somebody don't put a foot in there.
I kind of put that in my mock draft too. So in one of my excerpts and everything. So they definitely have to get after it, man. But listen, my sleeper pick, DP, you don't have to go far, baby. You don't have to go far, and it's not even a sleeper player. It's obvious, right? It's Anthony Richardson to the Seattle Seahawks. That's a sleeper pick, and let me tell you why. Because the minute that they draft Anthony Richardson, obviously they signed Geno Smith. I'm foreseeing Geno Smith is going to come into the season as a starter. But when we're talking about the Seattle Seahawks, as far as what they can be as a football team, I thought about something. I said Anthony Richardson is still going to play. Pete Carroll is going to put in packages. He's going to put in goal line packages. Like Anthony Richardson is going to do some wildcat things. He's going to be a running quarterback. They're going to Cam Newton this guy. And now you talk about how multiple the Seattle Seahawks can be. They can mess around, man, and be like a number one rushing offense next year, just because you can take Geno out the game, and then now you're converting those 31s. Or how about this? How many times, and they talked about it in the Super Bowl with those Jalen Hurts, those 3rd and 1, and those kind of, I guess, the Bush push, and they just push Jalen Hurts forward. Now imagine that doing with a 240-pound guy like Anthony
6'4".
Yeah, that's easy conversions, right? 3rd and 1, okay, cool. Put Anthony Richardson in the game, put 2 people behind him, push him forward, right? First down. And I think that's why I said this was a sleeper pick, because while people think that this is going to be a return on your investment for years to come, I think it has potential to be immediate return on investment, because I foresee Pete Carroll being a thinking outside of the box type of coach, and being like, hey, let's implement this guy in other situations to get him on the field early and get him comfortable.
Keith, you know me, I'm an A-Rich guy, man. It's one of my favorite players in this class, and I love that fit. Like you said, allow Pete Carroll, and Pete Carroll's like, it's not a lot of coaches are going to embrace Anthony Richardson and the youth and rawness to his game the way that Pete Carroll will and can. And he talked about that in Indy at the podium when he talked so highly of Geno Smith. He said, somebody asked him about Geno Smith. He said, you don't give up on guys.
Yeah,
you don't do it.
Listen, if he can fix Geno Smith 5 years and 10, how many years? Probably like 7 now, right? Like Geno been around for a minute. If he can fix Geno Smith, then I'm buying in on him fixing Anthony Richardson, right? Like I give him his credit, and he's a defensive coach. That's the crazy part, right? Like he's on the defensive side of the football, but you have to give him credit for what he has done.
And I like how you brought up the defensive side of it. Right? I remember, and you may have seen the clip too. I remember watching that clip, and I'm not comparing the situation, but like you think about the people in it. Like I remember watching that clip of Bill Belichick and Tom Brady in the office talking about Ed Reed. You got a defensive-minded coach and his star quarterback talking about the Hall of Fame safety for the Baltimore Ravens and trying to figure out together how, like, okay, what do you see, Tom, when you're under center and shotgun, when you're seeing him, what do you see? And Bill's talking about it from a defensive standpoint, and I think Pete Carroll can do that a lot. I think he did probably more than likely did that with Geno and helped Geno along, but he also can help Anthony Richardson. And then, of course, the obvious, right, with Anthony Richardson being there, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Kenneth Walker III. It's like, man, 2024.
2 bookend tackles.
Two bookend air raid tackles. Like, I know people hate the air raid, but Keith, that worked out perfectly for Seattle because those boys came in ready to pass protect. It wasn't no rawness to their game. You had to get them ready to run block a little more, but that's something that is a lot easier to teach than being so profound and technically sound in pass protection. So this is a pick that, it's not a sleeper for me. I love it. It's Dame stamp of approval on this, baby. I'm all for it. Let's go. So, me, I'm rocking with it, big dog. But guys, listen, we appreciate that. That's Mock Draft Monday, man. We appreciate all the love and support as always. Go subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to get the latest episode as soon as it is available. We thank y'all for making Locked On NFL Draft your first listen today. On tomorrow's episode, we getting into that Kentucky Pro Day. Will Levis, what did he do for his stock? How did he look? We're going to have our opinions on tomorrow's episode. For Keith Sanchez, you can find him on Twitter at @TheTalentCode. I'm Damian Parson, DP_NFL. Come and join the conversation again tomorrow on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.